Hmm, human music. I like it.
All right, let's do it. All right. Welcome back to another edition of the Human Music Show. That's at Human Music Pod on Instagram and at human_music_pod on Twitter. I'm Harry, your pop culture guru. And with me, as always, is my friend and co-host, Houston-based arts and leisure writer, Carlos. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, hello. I'm doing excellent this week. We are doing a little bit different this week. We have a video going. We do video sometimes for our Saturday night specials, but this week, because we had a special guest who you could probably see on your screen right now, who I'm about to introduce in just a second, we wanted to do a longer format video show and give you guys the full Fat Tony experience in video and audio. So
Well, I guess you spoiled it, yeah.
yeah. No, they know it's in the episode title already. Our guest this week is a Houston rap legend, internet personality, TV host, whatever all around creative individual from Houston, been in the rap game for over a decade, released his debut album, Rap Dar Gab, way back in 2010. And since then has just been releasing underground Houston classics, if you would. Most recently, we got a
damn. Thank you.
no problem at all. Most recently, we got the opportunity to review your latest release, Exotica, on our latest Saturday night special. There it is, right there, ladies and gentlemen. One of the coolest cover arts I've seen out of Houston rap in a long time.
Man, the glare that I got on this bitch is mad ugly. Let me turn the light off.
You can see my face in it.
Who did that cover art for you?
The cover art was done by Nagasi Armada. He's an excellent visual artist and rapper. He also did the artwork for the forthcoming Gambling Man Mariachi remix, too. We're going to drop that in like a month. And that cover is just as beautiful as the Exotica album cover.
The Gambling Man video was off the chain.
Yeah,
we fucking love that video. Yeah, we almost just did the whole episode about that video. But if you haven't checked it out already, do go check out Exotica, Tony's most recent release. Maybe only like 10 days ago was released. One of his better works so far. But, with all of that said, Tony, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. And I got to thank y'all because y'all's review of my album Exotica was phenomenal. I really like how y'all got into the details. Me and the producer GoldenEye really appreciated how you understood songs like Jeremy Bixby, and you were able to kind of understand the context that we were presenting everything in. And we have been really careful about our messaging and just thoughtful about this whole process of this album. So it was great to watch y'all's review and, see it all land.
Thank you, man. So I got to ask you, where did the idea for Jeremy Bixby come from? Because I was fascinated by that concept. Because I know you're sort of a thrift king yourself.
Yeah, so honestly, to really tell you where Jeremy Bixby comes from, I have to tell you about the album creation process.
Okay.
At the time, I lived in Brooklyn, and GoldenEye has been living in Jamaica for the past 5 years. And we decided for this album that he would come to where I'm at in Brooklyn for the writing sessions. And in turn, I would journey out to Jamaica to record the album with him. So for our writing sessions, it wasn't like a typical recording session or many recording sessions that I've had before. In these writing sessions, most of the time, me and GoldenEye just sat there and just talked. We talked about concepts, we talked about characters, we talked about ideas, and through these conversations, the album started to unfold. And once we landed on a concept that we really liked, we just ran with it. So with Jeremy Bixby, it honestly just started out with us talking about clothes and like going to a thrift store. I had gotten some clothing recently that was from some brand that I had never heard of. And when I tried to Google it, I couldn't find any info. And I was thinking like, wow, this is a brand pre-internet that has not been documented. Who knows what the story is behind this shirt? Like, was this company a failure? Was this company a big success? And I think we just went down the rabbit hole of that line of thinking and then came up with making a song about a shirt you find, and making some type of interesting story behind a shirt. And also through the song, we wanted to, honestly, what I'm about to say, it's really up to the listener, right?
Yeah.
But in our mind, we were viewing Jeremy Bixby as like a character who was really vain and was kind of after his goals for all the wrong reasons. Now,
Right.
some people pick up on that. Other people view him as a different type of figure. I've heard other people's talk about Jeremy Bixby as if he was a good person who was doing all the right things, but life is unfair, and it really sucks what happened to him. So it is totally up to the listener what they think about it. But this was a song that was just like one of many where we spent most of the day just talking about the character, what their origin story is like, what they would dress like if we could picture them, all these details. We got into all of that before even starting to really write the song, because it's all of those conversations that kind of get us in the right mindset to just let the song flow out.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorites off of that Exotica. It had, it's interesting you say that, because it's like a brand that you couldn't find anything on. Like, it's crazy to think about that was probably somebody's baby. Like that, somebody started a company and now it's just there's no information on it. So that's nuts to think about.
Yeah.
Happens a lot in art too.
Oh, absolutely. You could say the same about probably like records and EPs. But to get back to what we're talking about today, which is actually interesting, you're talking about like unreleased music and all that, kind of an interesting segue there. But the album that Tony chose for us to listen to today, and holy shit, what an album. Sign of the Times, 1987, ninth studio album by none other than Prince. This was released on March 30th, 1987, following his decision to fire and split and part ways with his longtime band, The Revolution. This is an album that was an amalgamation of several different studio sessions, multiple scrapped projects. We have tracks that are his alter ego Camille. We have tracks that were recorded with The Revolution, tracks that were part of the attempted triple LP that he tried to release slightly before this album. And finally what we got, this sort of what do you call it, like a
hodgepodge.
Yeah, but a compromise between him and his label Warner Brothers at the time to release this massive double LP, which didn't do commercially as well as his greatest hit of all time, Purple Rain. But over time, people have started to see the genius in this album, and a lot of people consider this his greatest work. I have here written that Rolling Stones called it the most complete example of Prince's artistic breadth and arguably the finest album of the 1980s. Pitchfork gave the massive Super Deluxe re-release, which was released this year, a nine album, 8-hour long super re-release, a perfect 10 of 10 rating. And it was inducted into the Grammys Hall of Fame in 2017. So with all of that said, Tony, please tell us and our listeners why you chose this album, what it means to you.
Just to chime in on a couple of things that you mentioned, there's an interesting interview. There's a podcast series that the Prince Estate put out for this album reissue. And one of the episodes is an interview with a guy from Warner Brothers, the head guy there. And he was the person who was supposed to deliver the news to Prince that Warner was going to reject his triple LP, which was really unheard of at the time because Prince was such a big star on the label. He pretty much got whatever he asked for, you know what I mean? Whether he was putting out something that was a big commercial success or a small commercial success, he was pretty much able to run his own universe, like create acts, sign acts, record as many albums as possible, get funding for movies and all kind of projects. So this is the first time that Warner really told him no. And rather than just cut down the triple LP, he took the bulk of it, cut a bunch of stuff, took the rest, and then recorded a bunch of brand new music, and that became the album. And it's funny because I think many of us can say that this is the better project this is probably a better project than if he put the full triple LP out.
Hmm.
But that was something that he held a grudge against Warner for a long time. Like, it's very well known that Prince had a lot of battles with Warner Brothers, but around the 90s when he was really falling out with them, he even cited this in an interview as one of the moments where he felt everything shift, and he started to see that Warner was going to try to have more of a creative control over his output than they originally agreed to. It was kind of agreed upon in his deal that he could do whatever he wanted, especially once he became a big success. So that was really probably a big shock for him in his operation. And another thing you mentioned, that it didn't perform as well when it came out. I believe it was a commercial success, but in comparison to Purple Rain,
Right.
it seemed like a flop. But it was nominated for a Grammy for Album of the Year back then. It had a few songs that were popular on radio. It just wasn't the number one hit album that you would expect of an artist like Prince, who at the time is up there with like Madonna, Michael Jackson, like George Michael, some of the biggest singers in the world. You know what I mean? But I picked this album because I'm a big Prince fan, and I find that this album is really true to what that Rolling Stone statement was. On this album, you get to see so many different versions of him, so many different styles that he does, and it's some of his best songs in each of those styles. Some of his best ballads are on this album, his funkiest songs, his best songs in like different voices, his like best more like straightforward pop rock songs, some kind of lo-fi experimental songs with live instrumentation, songs with only drum machine and synthesizers. You can really see the totality of Prince's musical output in this one album. And I think if I'm going to talk about Prince on this podcast, there couldn't be a better place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. See, so for me, when you recommend it, I had never listened to this album. Prince, to me, I've always appreciated Prince as a songwriter, but I don't think I'd ever listened to anything other than Purple Rain as a full album. And I would have said Purple Rain is, no brainer. That's Prince's best album. And then after listening to this 4 or 5 times, like, no, this is his best album. Like, as far as like what you said, like covering all of it. Like this is Prince. It's all there. All the different, little minutia is there.
Yeah. For me, so I probably come into this with the least Prince experience between the two of us, and my exposure to him before was just sort of this like surface level pop culture exposure that you get of Prince growing up in America, and so I was very interested to learn more, but I went into it with my preconceived notions of like Prince was a rock star, Prince was a pop star. Yes, there's going to be some funk. Yes, there's going to be some R&B, but he had a lane. And little did I know, like, he was inventing lanes. He didn't have a lane. He was doing whatever the hell he wanted to do. And what really surprised me, first of all, the first 2 or 3 listens for me, I struggled to wrap my head around it. I think that just the saturation of it, the diversity of sound, I was almost like I was trying to get through a wall. And it took a lot of research. The article you linked us to was really helpful, like reading that, watching some YouTube videos, getting my head around the cultural context of it. Then it started to like trickle, it started to trickle in. And then finally the water broke through it. And it was like, holy shit, this is a masterpiece. Like it took I had to do the work, which was cool. Like from a musical analysis and research perspective, this was a treat to do this week, to just like get to that point where I fully appreciated it. And then what came out of that was that my favorite tracks were the ones you wouldn't expect. The folkier ones, the ones that are not anything like what you would expect to hear from Prince. Those ended up being my favorites.
The more experimental, kind of out there.
Yeah, him doing stuff. I'm going to paraphrase something he said, but you mentioned that this was nominated for Album of the Year at the 88 Grammys, and it actually lost out to U2. And like I said, I'm paraphrasing, but basically Prince said that after that, he stopped going to award ceremonies. And he said, there's nothing against U2, but when I get beat by U2, what I think is I can make your music, but you can't make my music. So I'm not going to these award shows anymore, which was like
Yeah,
an
he was
incredible
actually
quote.
saying that they couldn't make Housequake
That's what it was.
in particular, which is a really crazy song.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, man. Prince is interesting. I kind of came into him like most people do through like Purple Rain and shit. Like I
Hmm.
saw Purple Rain when I was a kid. I loved the movie, thought it was funny.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
liked the songs because I would, see the music videos growing up, and like he would be on like the radio all the time. Especially if you listened to R&B radio, like Magic 102, they would play a lot of Prince on there, from like album cuts to singles.
Right.
And when I was in high school, I had a history teacher named Mr. Garner, and he was a big music head, and me and him would talk about music, and I know that he loved Prince. So this one weekend, I was listening to Purple Rain, and then I listened to Dirty Mind. And at the time, I was really attracted to the Dirty Mind album
Hmm.
because it had that like lo-fi feel, kind of like a new wave feel. Like at the time, I was very into punk music, and I heard Dirty Mind, and I saw in it like, oh, this is kind of like Prince. Kind of has like a punk edge to him that I didn't know about. And then I told my teacher that I love Dirty Mind, and then I also listened to Purple Rain that weekend, like really listened, and I was like, wow, this is musically really interesting, and like some of the songwriting is kind of like deep if you want it to be, like, songs about spirituality and like, you know, just like relationships, but not just a simple like, oh, I love you, I like you relationship, but like, drama, troubled feelings, trauma from like parents, and all kind of like deeper stuff that I didn't see at first. And when I told my teacher that, he was like, yo, come to my class early the next day. And he burned me 9 Prince albums,
Oh
burned me a
shit.
Morris Day and the Time album, a Prince B-Sides album. And one of the albums that he burned me was this album. And I was kind of turned off because it was a double disc. And in my mind, I'm like, yo, I'm just getting into this guy. Let me just stick to like the single albums first and just kind of like get a grasp on him.
Right.
And when I finally got to this album, I was just hooked because on like each of his albums, he does a different thing. Like he was a true artist in the sense that he's not just going to try to rehash a sound he had because it's popular. Like his 1999 album is a different feel from Purple Rain, a different feel from the, Sign of Times album, from the Love
Yeah.
Sexy album, from the, Parade album. They're all different feels. And when I got to this album, I was like, wow, bits and pieces that I like of all his different styles from all these previous albums. He is doing them all here in an updated way, and it's also him solo minus the band. So now you're like getting more of that lo-fi drum machine driven style that he was really on before the Revolution became his like main project. And I don't know, it just hooked me, and this album is so long and so detailed that over the years I keep coming back to it and having new favorite songs and like hearing different harmonies that he's doing, and there's all these different moments that I didn't catch before. It's like a really giving album, and it's kind of the same mindset I had with my new album Exotica. Like we wanted to really hone in on all the details, making sure the songs could have different meanings to people, really getting into the weeds of like the music, adding different instruments, even though it's all synth and like sounds that kind of sound like stock sounds, but that's our style. You know what I mean? We're like purposely choosing these sounds because it's gonna make our music sound different from anybody else. But we're like trying to give fans that listen to this album something that they can hold on to and keep coming back to, and keep getting more from the music and from the videos and from the art and the behind the scenes stories and just the whole package.
Yeah, I think the best albums, like I know all my favorite albums are ones that I've grown with, but they've grown too. Like my appreciation, every time I listen to it, it's new. It's never, no matter how etched you think it is in your mind, you can listen to it again, and then you're like, there's something I never noticed. I never picked up on that before.
Yeah, I like what you were saying, Tony, about those synthy sounds, the loops, and the drum machines being the music that, despite it sounding prepackaged and artificial. He was making authentic music with it. And there are parts of this album, especially the song we were just sort of alluding to. Um, I forget it every time. Housequake. In Housequake, you hear like the prelude to like b-boy rap and like break beats and MCing. Like he's doing all that in this, you know, arguably house slash funk song, but you can hear MC qualities in what he's doing in that b-boy sort of sound.
You know,
Uh,
Susan Rogers, his like longtime engineer, especially during that time,
mhm.
would talk about this sign of the times period as in like Prince's camp, at least amongst those two, he would acknowledge that he saw rap music was the next big thing, and that him as like a funk artist and other people of his era were starting to become old fashioned and out of date. And also there's the emergence of house music, techno music from like Chicago, Detroit, and I feel like a song like Housequake is him sort of adapting to the times without being corny. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like without coming off like I'm trying to be a rapper now or I'm trying to be
Right.
house now.
Trying to
Which
do what the
is
kids
some
are listening to now. That kind of, yeah.
yeah, which is something that I think that he later did, especially in like the early 90s. He was making a lot of songs that kind of sound like fake ass MC Hammer songs, and I'm saying that with love, but
Right.
I think that he was at his best when it was purely like no matter what is going on, I'm going to do my thing. And if there's even a hint of another style having an influence on me, it is being filtered through my mind. So it's going to come out totally original.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it because there are elements of this album where I see other influences, but it's still him. Well, without going further and further down the rabbit hole, let's go ahead and switch gears here and go straight into the rundown and talk about these tracks.